I'm Dr. Virgie Ellington, and in honor of Self-Care September and Suicide Prevention Month, I reached out to Dr. Kristin Carothers. Kristin Carothers, PhD, is a licensed clinical psychologist with more than a decade of practice in clinical and forensic psychology, including at New York Presbyterian Hospital, Columbia Medical Center, and private practice in New York City and Atlanta. Dr. Carothers is also an associate professor of psychiatry at the Morehouse School of Medicine. Dr. Carothers, thank you so much for coming back and joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
I know I reached out to you and you were so gracious to carve out time in your extremely busy schedule to talk about this important topic this month, September. And as of September 2022, there is a new 911 national number for when someone we love or someone we love is in crisis. It's 988. And the number went up and live nationally again. It's 911, basically, for when we or someone we love is in crisis. 988 went live this summer, July 15th, I think it was, 2022. So I really appreciate you taking time to talk about Self-Care September and suicide prevention, this hugely important topic, and just in time for the new number and the new talk line. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and really thank you for covering this topic on your channel. I think it's really important that we get as much information as possible out to people who could benefit from it.
So let me ask you, Dr. Carothers, what does self-care mean? I have to be honest, when I saw that there's a thing now called Self-Care September, I have to be honest, my initial reaction is it sounds a little bit feminine, meaning I've been socialized to think of self-care as, oh, getting your hair done, getting your nails done, going to the spa. Now, I've never been to the spa. That's just not a thing for me. Okay. So why does that seem to me feminine? And what does self-care mean? And why can't it be something that I think can be a masculine thing, a masculine concept? Why does it feel, is it just me that it seems like self-care seems kind of like feminine?
I don't know that it's just you, but I wonder if the way that we have conceptualized self-care from like a pop culture, pop psychology frame of reference makes it such that we've kind of trivialized it and taken it down to, oh, because you got your nails done or you got your hair done, you taking care of yourself, when those might be more likely to be things that you do to keep up an appearance, right?
Thank you.
Self-care is really about knowing yourself, who you are, and what you need to replenish your storehouse, right? So when we go through our daily lives, whether or not they're mundane or highly stressful and taxing, or if we're in roles where we're caregivers for others, we may spend so much time taking care of things related to our jobs, related to our family members, related to our children, where we forget to take some time to actually replenish ourselves. And so for me, self-care is as basic as remembering as an individual that you have needs that must also be met. And that if you don't meet your own individual needs, you are going to burn out. You're going to have lack. And so when we talk about self-care, whether you be man, woman, cis, transgender, whatever, you want to know who you are and when you are feeling burned out, when you are feeling depleted as if you can't go on. And in those moments, it's time to take a step back and to say, what do I need to become more energized? Is that I need to sleep more? I'm going to try to carve out some time where I could sleep. Is that I need to delegate some tasks that I've been handling to some other people who could also handle those tasks, so that I am not so harried and zany during the day that I'm just making moves without thinking about them and then not able to care for myself. So I think we want to focus less on specific activities and more on specific needs for replenishment.
Thank you so much for talking about the difference between appearance and refilling ourselves.
Yes.
And that's what I really wanted to understand is why the definition and in current culture, in American culture, pop culture, we think of self-care as something that's an elective and that costs money. And that, to the point, to your point, Dr. Carothers, the way that we're socialized, I think, to think of it is appearances, and that has nothing to do with it. Self-care is refilling your tank when you're running on empty, when you're running on fumes, recognizing that and what you need to do to refuel.
Absolutely. So if you think about a car, right? So we have our cars. We take our cars to the car wash to make them look great on the outside. We don't want them dirty. We want the kids' stuff vacuumed out from the inside. We want them to smell good, right? But if your car never got a car wash, it would still run. If your
Yes.
car, though, never got an oil change or never had gasoline, then you are going to not be able to move your car and you might do damage to your car, right? So if we think of self-car as being like our self-care, excuse me, not self-car,
I like that. Maybe we
self-care,
should think of it as
self-car,
self-car. That's a
right?
perfect analogy.
Yes,
I think I'm gonna have to use that, self-car.
yes, self-car, right? Self-care is our opportunity to refuel, to get that tune up, to make sure that the oil's been changed, right? Things that are going to keep us moving forward. So, if you know that because of limited time, you haven't been making appropriate choices in terms of the food you eat, self care is saying, you know what? I may have to invest some time in meal prepping on the weekends, or I may spend a little extra money to purchase some things that are pre-made so that I know what I'm putting into my body is healthy, right? And I'm limited on time. But this way, I can at least know that I'm filling myself up with things that are good for me, right? Self-care might be saying, I'm going to shut my phone off a little bit earlier. I'm going to put it on silent about 30 minutes earlier, and I'm not going to respond to a call that I was supposed to return. I'm going to go to bed, right? Everything doesn't have to be done right away. And I think many times when people are feeling burnt out, it's because they have this perception that they've got to do everything. And if they don't do everything, it won't get done. And so then you're resentful and you're under pressure. And when you're feeling insecure, resentful, and you're under a lot of pressure and you don't think you have help, you're going to burn out.
Perfectly said. So we talked about some myths about self-care, Dr. Carothers. What would you say are, in your opinion and experience, the biggest myths about suicide prevention in children or adolescents? Unfortunately, it's a real thing. Suicide is the second cause of death among people aged in this country between age 10 and 24, in children and adolescents and adults. If you can speak to myths about suicide prevention in children or adolescents and adults.
So, myths about suicide prevention. I think one of the things that we've got to know is that it is really important to validate people's emotional experience. So, I believe that when we go back to appearance, it may seem that someone has it all based on what we as society value: looks, educational attainment, status, celebrity status. And we may say they've got it all. They must be so happy. And then we hear that the person has felt totally unfulfilled. They felt alone. They felt misunderstood. They've experienced like such lows in terms of their moods and emotions that they can't understand why there is a need to move on or to continue living, right? When we operate at the surface level with people, we miss opportunities to understand what their real experience is. And so I think the biggest myth is that because someone looks fine or because someone has it all, that they are doing well and that they're okay. I think another myth is that a person has no reason to feel distressed or as if life isn't worth living, right? So you may hear a parent say, well, they were given everything. We did everything for them, right? But what is your conceptualization of everything, right? Do you really understand what this person experiences when they wake up in the morning? I think it's really important that people know that depression, anxiety, all of these symptoms have an organic root. they are not always situationally based, right? So situationally based means something bad happened and then this person felt this way. Organic means that people have neurotransmitters in their brains that impact their experience of moods and emotions. When there are deficits, when there are areas that where there's too much of a specific neurotransmitter, you're the MD, right? You can speak to this type of science. This is real, right? Depression is real. These symptoms are real. They can be a result of chemical imbalances. They can be a result of difficulty that has a brain basis. When we negate that, we don't truly understand what a person could be going through that results in them saying, I need relief. And I don't think anybody else will understand or believe me that I have relief. And so I'm going to take matters into my own hands and get relief myself, right? Mm-hmm. So for some people, that decision to end their life may be because they needed relief. They didn't perceive that other people could understand, that there were other resources. And so I think I'll stop there because I know I've talked a lot. But the biggest myth is that people have to have a reason, that it has to be a situational stressor that caused it, or that a person couldn't necessarily be experiencing something biological that contributed to their expression of moods and emotions.
The good news is that people are recognizing that just because someone looks like they have it all together, to your point, the appearances, and this in our culture, in the American culture and society, we value appearances. And what it looks like on paper, how fabulous it looks on paper. It looks, the appearance. Ones that we find out later that we thought of, the ones that had it all together, had everything, and the strong ones, they were the ones that were struggling in silence, and we're realizing we have to check in with all of us, no matter what we look like, because we have no idea if we don't check in what's really going on with them, how they're feeling every day when they go to bed by themselves at night and wake up in the middle of the night and wake up in the morning. How are they feeling?
When we focus so much on appearances, like if someone looks like they should be in distress, but they're actually quite happy, right? Versus when someone looks like they have it all, but they are really not doing well. I think we have to kind of try to dig a little deeper. Sometimes it's important to say things seem okay, but maybe this person needs a check-in. Like, have you ever considered that someone having it all could also be a lot of pressure? There might be a belief that they've got to maintain it all or they will not be loved, right? There might be a belief that if a kid makes a mistake, they can't come back from that mistake. With some younger children who've committed suicide, many times there's this level of impulsivity, right? There's some anger, there's some depression or some sadness, there's an exchange of information that happens, and then the person says, okay, I don't want to be here anymore, and so I won't, right? We don't always know the function of why a person decides they want to live anymore. But I think what we can do as like human beings, as mental health professionals, as health professionals, is to say to people, validate their distress, validate their emotional experience, and to ask if there's anything we can do to help. And to validate things are tough and your life is still worth living. So it's these things, this like this dialectic, two things that are opposite can be true at the same time. You're experiencing distress and you are worthy.
And they're not two mutually exclusive events. They can live together at 100%. Yeah.
There are lots of bad things that happen in the world, and there's still some good.
I'm a lay person. I'm not a mental health professional. I'm not a physician. I'm just a parent, or I'm an aunt or an uncle. I'm a friend. I'm in junior high. What can I do to check in with someone? I don't know all the fancy words. Wow, that's good to know that, we can be not feeling okay, but still be worthy. What do I say to someone that I'm afraid that may be feeling hopeless or something's off? How do I do that, Dr. Carothers? How do I check in if I think something is off? And if I'm still worried, if they deny that I'm still worried, number two, what do I do?
I think that's an excellent question. When we ask people, well, how are you doing? We have a canned response, fine. And I think sometimes it's about going a little deeper and saying, what's going on with you? I've noticed. How are you doing? How are you really doing? I've been pretty stressed out. How's things going for you? Sometimes like volunteering a little bit of information about yourself and making yourself human and knowing that you've had an experience can help someone else feel safe in sharing.
This is what I'm struggling with. This is what I've struggled with. How are you doing with all of this?
Yeah. The pandemic, I think, was a time when we really saw this happening. People were isolated. They were sick. They weren't sick. They're confused. We didn't know how long this was going to go on. And it was really a time when we figured out that connection was super important. If you notice someone seems disconnected, or when they're connected is superficial, it's a good time to check in. It's better to say something and have the person to be like upset with you or offended
Yes.
than not say anything at all. I think about people that I've known who have committed suicide, right? And I was not a professional, a lay person, people in my life. And when you look back on interactions that I might have had with those people, you know, I wondered, like, you know, there was this quality of something made me feel a little sad, or there were things the person would say that I never had an idea that they would actually go through with the suicide, but there were some things that made that person feel pressured, hopeless, alone. Was there anything anybody could have said? Was it just that the person decided that that's what they were going to do? Could things have been different if they thought somebody really got it? Or if they thought they could really get relief? And I think sometimes people don't think they can get relief. And so now I'm on a board with an organization called Our Minds Matter. It's based in Washington, D.C. It's a nonprofit that's dedicated to preventing teen suicide, and with the goal of a day when no teen considers suicide. And what Our Minds Matter does is they provide students with the resources to lead their own groups in high schools. You can learn more about them at ourmindsmatter.org. And their goal is to spread across the country. Right now, they're based in the DC, Virginia, Fairfax County, Maryland area. And what they have seen is that by having peers who are knowledgeable, peers who are there to help, it can really help teens and kids who are feeling distressed have an outlet.
So go to ourmindsmatter.org, and we'll post this under the show down below if you're watching on YouTube rather, and if you're listening, it'll be on the voiceamerica.com site. What does the website provide in terms of resources? Why would a young person or someone who loves a young person go to ourmindsmatter.org?
Well, the website provides information about teen suicide, so basically giving you some knowledge about what's happening. It provides information about starting a club at your school if you want. The organization just received a grant from Lady Gaga's Born This Way Foundation, where they will be able to expand and do more work. The organization has an amazing Instagram page. If you go on Instagram and look for Our Minds Matter, where they've got interviews with other professionals and teens. They also have a toolkit or a resource that you can download for use in your home, in your school, in your community, that basically promotes positive mental health and coping skills and gives you strategies for talking to people when you have concerns. And so I think it's an excellent place. Even if you just go to the Instagram account or the website, it's got great information. There's another organization, the Acoma Project, and it's by the head researcher is Dr. Alfie Breland-Noble. She has been featured on MTV recently, doing work for just getting the word out about mental health for teens and adolescents of color. Her website has great information and resources. There's a youth mental health report, children and teens of color, that's there. Another resource is the childmind.org website. And Child Mind is an organization based in New York. They have excellent resources for parents, teachers, students. They've even partnered with the state of California to produce a series of videos on coping skills. And so there are resources out there that are available and that are evidence-based and effective.
Wonderful. And we'll post those sites and that information also. So that's an important point to discuss, that anybody could be struggling with crisis and suicide. And I mentioned earlier, I found a statistic that suicide is the second leading cause of death for young people in the United States between ages 10 and 24. And adolescence is up until age 25. So in terms of, we're talking about youth, we think of, you're legally adult at 18 and or 21, but actually the brain is still forming. It's still not completely cooked until we're 25. So adolescence is until age 25. Yes. And so suicide as the second leading cause of death behind accidents for young people between ages 10, that just boggles my mind. Only second to accidents between ages 10 and 24 is huge information. In terms of dispelling myths, that it's something that happens one-off if somebody's been bullied. Yes, that increases the risk. Stress increases the risk of being vulnerable to a suicide ideation, and actually impulsivity. When we're young, we're more impulsive. Yes. Our brains aren't fully cooked to actually do something impulsive, to make a permanent, to try to find a permanent answer to a temporary problem. The other thing that 988 talks about in terms of the campaign to let folks know about the 911 hotline, the new number 911 to call when you and or our loved ones, we're struggling with crisis or suicide, is their website, 988lifeline.org. So call the number 988 or go to 988lifeline.org. And they talk about that. I think they do a great job, and I was pleasantly surprised that they did, I think, a nice comprehensive job of addressing that anybody could be struggling with crisis and suicide. We talked about youth, disaster survivors, suicide survivors, yes. Native Americans, First Nation folks, veterans, people who survive loss, who are grieving and are just heartbroken and feel hopeless. LGBTQ, or higher risk. I talked about attempt survivors, and also the site and the 988 number actually has resources for deaf and hard of hearing. So that's something to be aware of. They also talk about that they have special resources for folks that are in crisis and feeling like they may have some ideation that the only way to get rid of their pain is just to leave the system of things and take themselves out. They have support for folks that are neurodivergent. And we talked about Black mental health, people of color with mental health struggles, and maternal mental health. So just wanted to put that out there, that I was really pleasantly surprised. There's really great resources that wasn't there. I'm dating myself, but when I was growing up 100 years ago, they didn't have these resources. We would just hang up the wall phone and, be upset with, someone who called us a name or something when I was in junior high or high school, and say, well, you know what, I can't take this anymore. I'm trapped. There's no way out. I'm going to take a bunch of aspirin or a bunch of Tylenol. This stuff didn't exist. So I'm just really pleasantly surprised. The other thing I found out when we're talking about Suicide Prevention Month and Self-Care September is that there used to be a number called 1-800-273-TALK. 1-800-273-TALK. That was what now is 988. And so they're saying if you were aware of that number, you can still call it. They say the number will continue to function indefinitely. So that's all wrapped up into 988, 911 when we or someone we love is in crisis. It's 988. So, and again, online, 988lifeline.org. So this is really, really helpful stuff. So Dr. Carothers, what would you say if you were able to sum it all up, wrap it into like one umbrella? What would you say you really want folks to know about suicide prevention? What does your psychologist want you to know about suicide prevention?
I think what your psychologist wants you to know about suicide prevention is that we want to make sure that we are checking in with people frequently and often, and not just a surface level, how are you, but what's going on with you? Tell me how things have been. share a little information about yourself, it can help people to feel validated and supported. Remember that just because people appear to be okay or appear to have it all,
They appear like they're bawling, right? Ballers and just,
I mean, they're not experiencing distress. I follow some of the rap artists because I'm like a big hip hop head and I'm trying to stay current.
and you're in Atlanta. You're
And
currently
I'm
in
in
Atlanta.
Atlanta, right? And so one of the artists that I follow posted a couple of weeks ago, and she said, sometimes people might not be okay. There was something she alluded to where it said, like, yes, professionally it may seem that I'm okay, but I've got hard days too. So just remember, everybody's got hard days, and you can sometimes be the person who can let them know it's okay to have a hard day.
It's okay not to be okay. You might be the one person to be able to let them know that it's okay not to be okay.
And that there's somebody who can be there for you. It may not be someone in your family.
That's right.
Be a close friend, but there are people who can be there, right? So the 988 number is because we want people to know you are not alone. There are resources, even if you feel alone, right? So feeling something, believing something doesn't make it true.
That's right. Even if you've made mistakes, you said this earlier, I love it and want to go back to it. Even if you've made a mistake, you are still worthy. No matter what internally you're saying to yourself, that voice in your head is telling you, no matter what people outside of you are saying to you, no matter what the world is saying, no matter what the noise is, you are still worthy. And you might have to pick up the phone and dial 988 to make sure that you're reminded, hey, you're still worthy.
Yep. And reaching out for help does not make you weak. For help makes you savvy, right? That's self-care. To get help is self-care.
Thank you. I was talking with someone yesterday about the fact that they were saying something along the lines of that it is a sign of health. You're still healthy if you recognize something is wrong. Only people that are extremely sick, extremely ill, don't recognize something is wrong and don't want help. If you recognize something is wrong, that means you're still healthy.
I love that.
So the analogy I gave her with this is an aunt of mine who was talking with me about a member of her family that has some memory loss. And she was saying, well, he recognizes too that there's something wrong. And I said, you know what? That's wonderful news, believe it or not, because that means that he's still well enough to understand something is wrong. I gave her the analogy, and it's not, we often separate behavioral health, mental illness, things that happen because something is off in our brain, so it affects our behavior. We separate that from body health. And I explained to her, and I want to share the analogy of where I was going with it. And why I wanted to share this analogy of asking for help is health. That's a sign of health. Because back in the day, before triage became a thing, and decades ago with emergency rooms, if the emergency room was overwhelmed, people are sleeping on the floors, lying on the floors, sleeping in the chairs, and the docs would come out and they would look around and they would say, okay, everybody who needs help, raise your hand. And they would look at the people who raised their hand. And then they would go to the people who did not raise their hand, because that means they're so sick and they're so ill, they can't ask for help. They can't hear. They're not conscious. They don't have the energy or strength, the ability to raise their hand. So same thing with asking for help, to say, you know what, I'm not okay. I'm struggling. Something is off. Something is wrong. Absolutely. That's the analogy I wanted to share. I was talking to a relative yesterday. So thank you for bringing that up, Dr. Carothers. It's healthy to ask for help. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for joining us and thank you for sharing this information. And I am going to include the website and where to find you, Dr. Carothers, and these wonderful, outstanding resources. Thank you again so much.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and everybody, good luck with the last week.
There you go. Thank you.